So we've been looking at this idea about change. And what we have discovered is there is a constancy to change. That the thing that you can count on more than anything else is that life will change. For me, it always seems to change just about the time I think I have something figured out. And then it evolves. So as we've been exploring this concept, it turns out there's a number of ways you can approach change in your lives. You can resist it and then adapt later, or you can just adapt. Your choice. You can figure out how to do that. So in that it is spring and all new possibilities are coming forth and life is renewing itself, I thought it would be lovely to talk about chaos and the void and destruction. Because I know this is a crowd that loves their destruction talks. You know, I remember years ago hearing Matthew Fox speak, and for those who are not familiar with Matthew Fox, brilliant theologian. He was a Dominican priest. He got a little outside the box, and some organizations aren't okay with that, and so he was silenced for a year. And I loved his opening line when he came back, and he said, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted. But he eventually went on to form his own institute, and it's just a brilliant theologian looking at, from the Christian mythology, from the Christian perspective, these whole stories of creation. He has a beautiful approach to what he calls creation spirituality, and it looks at the four paths. In fact, I might even do that series sometimes, but one's the via positiva, everything comes out of the positive, and one is the via negativa. And he was saying to us, I love your teaching, I love your philosophy, but you're not really a true theology, you have no via negativa. And that got me thinking about, in Science of Mind, we are teaching that we should be happy, healthy, perky people all of the time. And if you can do that with jazz hands, all the better, right? And so sometimes in our approach, that's not exactly what we teach, but can be an underlying consciousness that sometimes makes us feel that if we're not demonstrating perfect health, abundance beyond measure, in other words, if we're not all tall, thin, and handsome, then there's something wrong with our consciousness. Have you ever noticed that? So, fix it. That's all I have to say is fix it. But I'm going to suggest to you that it really, as I've moved more deeply into the teaching and into the philosophy and into the understanding, I realize that life is just life. Life is becoming, life is evolving, life is expressing itself, and it's always in a state of dynamic flow and a state of dynamic change. Was reminded of this wonderful story, a Sufi story, and Kafir is found out. Man comes along, and Kafir is searching along on all fours, and the man says to him, "What are you looking for?" And he says, "I've lost my key." And he says, "Well, let me help you find it. Where do you think you lost it?" He said, "I lost it inside." And he said, "Well, why are you looking out here?" And he said, "Because the light is so much better out here." Now, I'm going to suggest to you that sometimes we are looking for in the light what we may only find in the darkness. So I may get my own banishment here for being heretical in the Science of Mind way of being, but bear with me. Because what we're looking today at this idea of creation out of chaos. And so in a creation out of the void, you see, as you study mythology and world mythologies, you see over and over and over a common thread and a common theme. You see, mythology helps us to answer questions. Where did we come from? How did we get here? What's the meaning? What's the purpose? And so throughout history, humanity has come together and tried to figure out those questions. And they've come up with some pretty interesting ways of approaching it. So in the Greek mythology, if you remember your 9th grade Greek mythology, we realize that it all begins with chaos. Chaos was the first god named, guess what? Chaos. It's where we get the word. Chaos is a yawning nothingness. And out of the void, out of chaos, emerged Gaia, the earth. And some other primary divine beings, Eros, Abyss, Erebus, all of these great ideas. Just for fun, gals, you'll like this. Without male assistance, Gaia gave birth to Uranus, the sky, who then fertilized her. Now, if you ever had any question, do women have it going on or what? That pretty definitively answers the question, right? We don't need you, we just let you stick around, right? But you see, before there was Gaia, before there was the earth, there was chaos. Of course, we know in Genesis, most of us have read at least that first paragraph. Some didn't go a lot further than that, but, we'll give you credit for having opened the book. It says to us, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And creation began to happen out of the deep, out of the darkness. We are very comfortable with that mythology. We've all grown up in it. It is our Western model. Science of Mind fits very beautifully into that. Ernest Holmes says to us that through some inner act of self-contemplation, God creates. In other words, by contemplating itself, the divine brings into manifestation form and being and expression. And we then are created in that image and in that likeness, which is to say that out of our own self-contemplations, we can create. So we like that out of nothing comes something. But you see, there's some other really good creation stories. And because I don't do Hinduism nearly enough, I thought, hey, come on, let's give the Hindus a whirl around here, right? It's always Jesus and Buddha, Jesus and Buddha. So here we go. So here's the story, in case you're not familiar with your Hindu creation mythology. According to Hinduism, at the appointed time, from within the vast sea of potential that was Brahman, there arose a sea manifest, and within this cosmic sea appeared a great serpent. Astride this great serpent rode a sleeping Vishnu. As Vishnu slept astride the serpent, the totality of the cosmic sea began to reverberate with the divine transcendent vibration of the syllable Om. We know Om is the source, the ultimate essence of Brahman. Upon receiving this divine vibration, Vishnu awoke, and from his navel grew a lotus, and as it opened from the lotus emerged Brahma. Vishnu then informed Brahma that it was time to form creation. Brahma then proceeded to divide the lotus into 3 pieces, from which he created the heavens, the sky, and the earth. Makes sense. Therefore, in Hinduism, Brahma is seen as the creator aspect of Brahman, the Godhead. Vishnu is named the preserver, the sustainer. A third aspect of Brahman, rounding out the Trinity, is Shiva, the destroyer. If one correlated these three aspects of Hindu divinity with aspects of physics, one could relate Brahma with space and matter, Vishnu with the properties, laws of physics, and Shiva as the aspect of cyclical time. Brahma and Shiva are involved in a continuous, endless dance of creation and destruction, in which the universe is endlessly born, thrives, dies, and is reborn. In Hinduism, this cyclical process of the birth, death, and the eventual rebirth of the universe is called samsara. Brahma creates, Vishnu preserves, and Shiva destroys, and the cycle is endlessly repeated. Now, I think there's value in understanding that version of Trinity, that there is an endless dance of creation and destruction. You see, destruction is not death. Sometimes we confuse it. And we think that because something appears to be falling apart, we want to gather our sources and our resources and our strength and get it back to where it needs to be. Right? How can this be falling apart this way? But those of us that have lived a few decades, I'm almost at 3, so, all right, 4, okay, I admit. Right? That have been around for a while, we always begin to see, as we have perspective, that which is falling apart is actually very often a coming together for something new to be born, and it cannot come into expression until the old goes away. So Shiva, Lord Shiva, so this Trinity, so understand this is a Trinity. The Godhead has Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. 3 aspects of the divine are working in this endless dance of creation and destruction. And so when we are, as you hear me say all the time, when we're paying attention at the realm of form and we're going, oh my God, form is changing. Guess what? It's what form does. We should not be shocked by this, right? And yet, if we are externally focused with our life, then there's a part of us that thinks, well, if I can just get form to behave, according to my preconceived idea, then all will be well. And so sometimes in class we're talking about this idea that sometimes people think, I know the problem. The problem is I need more money. And so I'm going to get more money so it will solve my problem. Silly people. Right? Seems logical enough, doesn't it? And yet what we know is form outpictures as money. It is really about changing that inner relationship with Source that allows us to transcend the experience. And that may or may not have anything to do with greater money in our life. It may have to do with a new relationship of being in abundance, in being in the flow of life. So I love this idea. I've come to value and appreciate that Lord Shiva sometimes needs to get busy in our lives in order for us to manifest this thing that we desire. But sometimes I have known people, I'm not going to point, I'm not saying they're in the room, they might be, I'm not saying they are, I'm not saying they're not. But I have known people that want to avoid the void. Right? Let's fill up our lives. Sometimes, rather than when we go through those dark places, we say, well, I know, I'll go look in the light. I'll go someplace where the light is better to see if I can't find that key that I've lost in the darkness. And I'm going to tell you, at some point, if you are committed to this spiritual journey, some point, the darkness will be across the land. Why is that? I don't know. I didn't make the rules. I'm just telling you what the rules are, right? The dark night of the soul, it speaks to this sense of loss, of spiritual grieving, of that sense of even though we know there is something, that which we used to sustain us no longer exists. But I will tell you that it is in this place, in this darkness, in this void, and in this chaos that the next is born. And yet we live in a time and in a culture and that says avoid pain at all costs. Right? So if you have any kind of pain, we have a pill. Now, I'm always kind of intrigued by these commercials. If you ever watch commercials on TV and they say they have all these happy, peppy people living lovely lives, having picnics and doing all this stuff, as the announcer is reading, and it may kill you and you may have oily discharge, which I've never figured out what an oily discharge is, but I don't know where it's discharging from, but it can't be good. Listen, I'm telling you. So it's like, turn off this, listen to the sound of this is saying, but whatever, avoid the pain. We are avoiders. We are void avoiders. We are pain avoiders. We don't want to experience any pain. Now, I'm not saying we should all be martyrs here, but I am saying that pain is a part of our lives. That pain and pleasure are parts of it. We're all about the pleasure. I'm good. I'm happy. I'm enjoying pleasure. Pain, oh, no. But I'm thinking that in the Trinity, in the fullness of life, in the creation and the preservation and in the destruction, all of those things must be a part. And so perhaps we would do well to learn to enter into the deep. And so spiritual teachers of all different traditions will tell you that there is going to come a time in your spiritual practice that which used to work doesn't seem to work anymore. I call it the void. I call it the void in our lives when that which used to be is no more, and that which is yet to be ain't yet. And you're like, you have a little help here, right? Here I am. I can't go back. The new's not here. Now what? And I say it is into that place that truly our spiritual power comes. To be at peace in the midst of the nothingness. To be still and listen to the still small voice. You see, culturally, we are bombarded with information, and we are somewhat addicted to having stimulation, to being entertained, to having all of this sort of thing. And heaven forbid that there might be a moment of silence. You ever had that moment when you're all sitting around the table and for whatever reason, everybody stops talking at once? It's like, what's that sound? Oh, it's silence. Well, we can't have that. Let somebody say something stupid. Somebody, what about this weather? Okay. Whew. Boy, we almost had to avoid something there. That would have, who knows what could have come out of that. Sometimes we do this in our lives. Sometimes even in our spiritual practice. We get so engaged in the next, the new, the fast, the da-da-da-da-da, right? So I'm going to suggest to you that there is value in understanding this process. There is value in understanding the different types of creation myths. Because they're all just stories that are made up. I hope I'm not busting anybody's bubble here by saying these things. Some of this stuff got made up. For example, I'm going to go right out there. As long as I'm going to lose the license, I'm going to go for it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Yeah, says who? Who wrote this all down? Right? Somebody made that up. Somebody made up the creation stories. Now, along comes later John. He says, that's good, but here's one better. And this is what I kind of like about the Jewish tradition is they take a good story and they make it better. They do. I'm telling you, it's true. That rather than destroy the old story, they just kind of, well, that was good, but let's do it again. And if you want to prove it, just, check it out. There's 2 creation stories in Genesis. Do you know this? There's this one we just referred to, and all that's done, and things are happening, and a whole universe is created, and Adam and Eve are doing this whole thing, and then all of a sudden we start over. And they start with Adam and Eve. Like, what? Huh? Because somebody just added a better story. I like that. It makes me not be too literal. I think you get into trouble, but it makes it good for me. So then later, Christianity is emerging, and John says, let me tell you what I think. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God, the Logos. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life. And that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has overcome it not. Beautiful, beautiful words. We underestimate the power of the void, of the emptiness, of the stillness. That place where all things can be born anew. Thomas Edison, you see, when Lord Shiva is dancing through our life, now you know what to call this, okay? Your life's not falling apart. Lord Shiva's just dancing, right? And rearranging and changing, and so that the eternal something can happen. But you see, so many people, when all of our great figures that we look to through history and through religion and through all these different things are people who we take strength from, not because their lives worked perfectly and they were never challenged, but because of the appearance that their life fell apart, and out of that something great was born. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. We look to him as a great example of kindness and generosity, but he wouldn't be Nelson Mandela without the years in prison. You see, when you look at these great figures, they've all been tried, they've all been tested, we've all been tried and tested by life, and it is a part of the scheme of things. There's nothing wrong if this is happening. I love the story of Thomas Edison. You know Thomas Edison, we all know, in creating these light bulbs that we all take for granted, there's 10,000 experiments. Now, I think that's kind of a testament to some persistence. I'd be at 4 and going, I never liked science anyways. Right? But we all know his famous lines when he said, I've not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Right? He did 10,000 ways, 10,000 experiments before he got to the one that worked. This is what I think sometimes with our lives. I see how sometimes people in their spiritual life, they get to a point and then it is almost as if they stepped into a void because it was working so well. They had that affirmation thing down. Parked wherever they want, whenever they want it. They had reached a pinnacle of spiritual success. And then something happened and it doesn't seem to work. And it's the void. And that's frustrating and it's painful and it's like, I don't know. Right? Because the new's not here. But if we're willing to be in that, you see, what the part of the story that isn't commonly known with Thomas Edison is that when his factory burnt to the ground, he was 67 years old. Not a spring chicken. Had done all of this work, had created this whole thing, and his factory burnt to the ground, destroying countless lab records and millions of dollars of equipment. And so when he went and surveyed his losses, 67-year-old man, his whole life's work burnt to ashes, he said, "There's great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." That's insight. That's awareness. Right? Sometimes we look at these, in hindsight, trivial things like, oh, how will I bear this? How will I make it through this? As my friend Linda always likes to say, you'll make it through because you're still here. Oh yeah, right? You've made it through everything so far, right? So here we are. Moments of new creation always are preceded by moments of destruction. So I like to just say, Lord Shiva is doing his thing, right? Clearing the way so that something new can be born. So how do we get through it? How do we get through the void? Well, I think there's some simple steps that I've discovered. Again, the void being that place between what was and what is yet to be. Now, here's the thing. Be aware of this. I watch this often, is that sometimes when we are starting on this spiritual path, or maybe we've been on this spiritual path for a while, but we set a new intention. And we're like, this time I'm serious. No kidding around this time. This is not one of those, oh, yes, we're at a cocktail party and we're all creating stuff, so I'll create something. And no, this is like, okay, what's it going to take? And so we move into the moment. We have this vision, this flash of possibility. We can sense it and feel it and know it. And then we start moving to it. And it stops moving away from us. And so we're like, okay, where do I go? Part of us wants to go to the vision. Part of us says, this stinks. I'm going to go back to what's comfortable and familiar. I know you know these people. I'm thinking about them too. I'm not pointing. No, there's no, just jazz hands. It's all jazz hands today. Right? Here I am. Moment of voidness. Old familiar, new uncomfortable. You see, and understand this is always uncomfortable. If it were comfortable, you'd already be there. You'd already know how. But in the void, the thing is that if we're not careful, we will go back to our old way of being. We will go back to more familiar patterns. We'll recreate the same situations we've created. Or we break through and move to the vision of possibility, and we embrace that, embody that, and allow that to be expressed. So how do we get there? The first thing is name it. Acknowledge it. I'm in the void. Don't need to be saved. Don't need to be fixed. Don't need to be... See, this is one of the greatest lessons. I finally began to surround myself with people that would be okay with me being in the void and support me there. Right? Nothing to fix. But it is to be named. It is to be acknowledged. It is to be expressed. And then stop resisting it. You are where you are. Edison saying, cool. All our mistakes are burned away. Moment of new possibility. And giving thanks. Because you and I both know, we can look at our lives and we can say, those moments that seemed the most awful also became the fertile soil for our new lives to emerge. I say I'm so grateful all the time that my plan didn't work out. My plan did not include me being here. And yet, this is where I know I am to be. So stop resisting and give thanks for it. And then, most importantly, we ask ourselves the question, what is seeking to be revealed? What is seeking to be birthed? What is seeking to be made known and to be expressed and to be revealed into the world? This is happening for a reason. And so it is in that silence and in that listening and that feeling, even if it's dark, even if it's painful, even if it's less than warm and fuzzy, to be willing to sit in that and listen to the voice of Spirit. Because we do know all of the creation myths tell the same story, that out of the void comes new creation. Out of the darkness is born light. Out of chaos comes Gaia. So be willing to be in that place. This is when our spiritual practice becomes essential. That we have to believe in a greater vision than we can currently see or experience right now. We have to trust that the divine laws of life, the divine power, has its greater good in mind. There's a great story from Rumi that talks about the man who is spading his garden. And the fool comes up to him and says, "Why are you destroying the earth?" He says, "You idiot, get out of here." Because the wise man knows that we have to spade the soil. We may have to make it look ugly and not pretty like it was before so that the new life can be born again. The spiritual cultivation that we're doing, this mental cultivation, sometimes means that we have to break up what was so that the new life can emerge. That it's all good. It's all part of the divine plan that is unfolding through us, even though it may not be according to our plan. Trust that there is a wisdom and intelligence at work within you. Honor it and allow it. And this too shall pass. Let us pray. As we simply turn inward, honoring and acknowledging this one infinite presence, this one divine being, this one life that is transcendent of all of the names that we give it. And how good it is to recognize that it is all one. The presence of love, the presence of wisdom, the presence of joy, the presence of harmony. Seeking its expression in and through and as all of creation. So we are reminded in this moment that that same divine intelligence that has caused this universe to be in expression, that causes the planets to be in balance and motion, that causes the rains to fall, the flowers to grow, and all of life to renew itself, is the very life that is expressing itself through us right now. And because I know that in this presence I live and move and have my being, I know that the word that I speak has power. And so I speak it with clarity and conviction for each of us gathered here. For I know that we are each divine emanations of this one living Spirit, never separate from the one life. How simple and yet how profound it is to know that all of those qualities of Spirit are our divine inheritance. And so I call forth the presence of unconditional love. For I know that it heals and transcends our littleness, our old story. I know that we are renewed in the Spirit, that we are given a larger vision of possibility, that we allow our lives to unfold in ways of joy and harmony and peace. I know that we are divine, abundant beings, because we are one with the very source and substance of all that is. So we open our hearts and our minds to recognize divine flow, joyously giving and unconditionally receiving of this infinite bounty. We stand in the awareness of this presence of wholeness, knowing that that wholeness reveals itself as health, as well-being, as vitality. In this moment, we remember the truth of who we are. We celebrate our divine magnificence. We know that we are being called to a greater purpose and to a greater possibility, and so we say yes to that. How blessed we are. And because we are blessed, it's only natural that we extend a blessing. We bless this spiritual community. We know that it is a divine idea unfolding, abundantly supplied, divinely guided, serving as a light of truth and a beacon of love. We extend that blessing to our brothers and sisters around the planet. We're holding that high vision for a planet at peace, a world that works for all, a planet in harmony with itself. I see the greater possibility emerging through every man, woman, and child, and so I name it good and very good. And as always, we bless all priests, all rabbis, all ministers, teachers of every faith. For we honor and celebrate the many pathways to the divine, the many ways of understanding that which by its very nature is not fully comprehensible. So we bless, we love, we share, we forgive. We live in dynamic flow, and we know that it is good. In joy and gratitude, then, I'm simply giving thanks. I'm giving thanks for this inner spiritual awareness. I'm giving thanks for a law of mind operating upon the consciousness that we have established here, bringing forth the highest good for all concerned, in perfect timing and in divine right order. So naming it good and very good, I simply allow it to be so, as together we say, and so it is.